In this video, we will show you how to replace your front brakes, pads, and rotors on this Acura MDX. This will be located behind your front wheels. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing you need to do is raise and support the front of the vehicle so we can remove the wheel. To remove the wheel, we're going to remove all 5 of our 22mm lug nuts and we can get this off of here. Now that we have the wheel out of the way, let's pay attention to our brake caliper. Looking along the back side of it, we're going to remove our 2 17mm caliper slider bolts. Once we have those out of the way, we can remove the caliper from this area, push back the pistons, and give it a close inspection. You may have to pry this out of place. If that's the case, we're just using a small pry bar for this. Once you have the caliper dislodged, we're paying attention to our 2 caliper pistons. If you see any fluid coming out of here, it's brake fluid, and that means you have to replace the caliper. As for now, what we're going to do is go ahead and push in both of these pistons. When you do it, you want to make sure you push them both in at the same time. To push in both of the pistons at the same time, you could use a small chunk of wood or even original brake pad. Put it up against both the pistons, and then you can squeeze as necessary. Slide this in here. There we are. One last inspection to confirm there's no fluid coming out of this area and both pistons are completely pushed in. Continuing from here, you want to hang this aside, putting no pressure on your flex hose. Now we can start removing the brake pads. Your brake pads should have 2 clips on them, one on each side of the brake pads. Essentially, these clips are supposed to push the brake pads away from the rotor every time you release the brake. We'll just give those a quick inspection and set them aside for recycling. Let's remove the brake pads now. If you have a hard time pulling them out by hand, you could try prying them out with a small prying device. A quick inspection of those pads. Let's get this other one out of here. Now we can remove the caliper bracket from the area. This is held in place with 2 19mm headed mounting bolts. I'll just remove the first bolt, a quick inspection, start it back in a couple threads. Take hold of the bracket, remove the bolt. We'll set the bracket aside for now. We will have to clean and lubricate this. Now let's remove the rotor. To do this, I'm going to start on one of my original lug nuts here. Once you have that started on at least a few threads, we can continue on to removing the 2 Phillips head mounting screws that are holding the rotor to the wheel hub located behind it. To remove these Phillips head screws, it's easiest with a Phillips head bit driver. Apply pressure on this. Once it breaks free, typically you can spin it out by hand. Repeat the process for the second one. Continuing on, take hold of the rotor and try to remove it from the vehicle. If it feels like it's rusted or stuck in place, you may have to tap on it with a hammer, but be extremely careful not to damage any of your lug studs. Get that lug nut off of there. Remove your brake rotor. There it is, friend. Before you can install your brand new brake rotor, you need to clean up the mating surface on the wheel hub. Any small raised areas that are in this area can cause a brake pulsation. Go ahead and use a wire brush or even a piece of sandpaper if necessary. Just give this a quick inspection, make sure we did clean it up and there's no raised areas anywhere. We'll continue on with some copper anti-seize. Just work that around with a glove finger. Make sure we get inside each one of those screw ports. Let's install our brake rotor. When installing the brake rotor, you want to ensure that you can see the screw ports leading into the hub located behind this. Continue on to installing both of those mounting screws. We're just going to start them in by hand, then we can snug them up. Just make sure these are nice and tight. A light tap with the hammer. Now it's time to pay attention to our caliper bracket. Let's disassemble this so we can clean it and lubricate. Start with a small prying device. You can use a small screwdriver, pretty much anything. We'll remove each of our two caliper bracket tins, give them a quick inspection, you can set them aside. Your kit came with brand new tins, which you will be using. Once you have those off of there, we're going to pay attention to each of our two caliper sliders. For these, you just want to take hold of them while holding the boot. Gently start separating the boot from the slider pin itself. Take hold of the slider pin, give it a little spin, and slide it out of the caliper bracket. Once you have your slider pin out of there, the next thing we need to do is clean and inspect it. One of the things that you're going to find on only one of your slider pins is you will have a rubber vibration dampener. You need to ensure that that's still in good working order and it's not swollen or damaged in any way. The first thing I'm going to do is clean up the entire shafted area here all the way up into this small groove. This is where the boot would be. We'll make sure everything's clean and smooth, inspect the rubber dampener as well, and then we'll set this aside. There we are. I can see that it's not rotted or damaged in any way. The vibration dampener is still in good working order. Make sure you know exactly which one of these ports that this slider pin goes into. Let's repeat the process for the other slider pin. There's the other one. That looks good as well. Continuing from here, we'll remove our two caliper slider boots. For these, you want to go ahead and take hold of them, give it a little stretch, and start trying to tug it away from the bracket itself. If it feels like it's stuck in place, you can use a small pick or even a small screwdriver to gently start prying it out. Just be very careful not to cause any damage. Once you have that out of place, we just want to make sure that this is soft and pliable. We're going to use a clean rag. We'll clean out the center, removing any miscellaneous debris. One last inspection of this slider boot. We'll set that aside. Repeat the process for the other one. Now we're going to use parts cleaner directly inside each one of our two slider ports on the bracket itself. After applying some parts cleaner, we'll use a bore brush, removing as much debris as possible from inside of each of these ports. Just give that a quick rinse. A quick inspection inside of the port. Once you've confirmed that everything's clean, repeat the process on the other side. After cleaning both of those slider ports, the next thing we'll pay attention to is where our caliper bracket tins will sit. We need to clean each of the two areas on each side of the bracket. After they're clean, we can apply some lubricant and install our new tins. For this, you can use a wire brush or some sandpaper, whatever's best for you. After cleaning both sides of the bracket, we'll apply some high temperature caliper lubricant. You only need a tiny bit for each of the areas you had cleaned. Now it's time for our bracket tins. For these, you just want to align them, press them in, make sure they're secured in place. Continuing with our high temperature caliper lubricant, we're going to pre-lubricate each one of our two caliper slider ports. Now it's time for our two caliper slider boots. You want to make sure you have the inboard side going into the bracket here. We're going to take this and we'll roll it right into position. Once you do have it pressed in, just go ahead and give it a little spin and a light tug to make sure it's properly secured. Continuing on, we're using our high temperature lubricant and we're going to lubricate the entire slider pin. We'll make our way all the way down to the tip. On the one with the vibration dampener, we'll also lubricate that. But as we make our way up to where the slider bolt is, we need to make sure we add a little bit of lubricant inside of the groove where the boot will sit. We'll slide that into the caliper and then squeeze out any air from inside the caliper slider boot. A quick spin just to make sure everything's properly seated, and repeat the process on the other slider pin. Okay. Just clean up any residual mess here. And now we can get this over to the vehicle. Let's get the bracket in place. Continuing on, we have our 19mm bolts. We've already cleaned the threads and applied some blue thread locker. Once you've started both of them in, snug them up. The torque for these is 101 foot-pounds. Now let's have a look at the caliper itself. We need to apply some high temperature lubricant to each of the two pistons and the backside of the forward ears. We don't need very much here, just a tiny bit will do. This will help with vibration dampening and noise reduction. Now let's temporarily set this aside once more. We'll continue on with our brake pads. When installing your brake pads, you'll find in the brake pad kit, you're going to have two brake pads that have wear indicators on them. We're paying attention to the wear indicator and the location. For the passenger side, we're going to have this wear indicator down along the bottom area here. Continuing on, we have the outer pad. This one does not have a wear indicator. Once you have both of those in place, we'll continue on with our two brake pad springs. As far as these springs, they're going to go into the ports that are located in each of the corners of your brake pads. We'll hold the brake pads together, continue on with those. They just slide right into the ports on the brake pads themselves. As you slide them in, you need to make sure you're holding onto the brake pad. If you were to release them, they should pull away from the rotor. After that, you want to take the caliper and we'll slide it into place over the brake pads and over the slider pins. Start in those caliper slider mounting bolts. When installing your brake caliper, you want to make sure you have it so your flex hose is not twisted in the wrong direction. Now we can get the caliper in place. We're going to slide it over the brake pads and sliders. Continuing on, we'll install our two brake caliper slider mounting bolts. Start them in, snug them up. The torque for these is 53 foot-pounds. Once you have the wheel in place, start on all 5 of your 22mm lug nuts. We'll bottom them out, get the wheels safely on the ground, and torque them to 94 foot-pounds. The wheels back on the ground, we'll be torquing these in a crisscross manner. Torqued. Okay friend, we finished the installation of one side of our front brakes. The process for one side of the vehicle is the exact same thing as the other. After completing that, make sure you pump up the brake pedal till it's nice and firm and take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.